Hello and welcome to Honest Faith Conversations. As always, I am your co-host, Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about American Gods, Season 1.
We were going to be doing this in a special setting. We were taking a short road trip today to go and see some old friends. And we were going to record on our way back, but our son was just having a bad day.
Yeah, that poor little kid. But nothing a good night's sleep can't fix.
Yeah, and so we didn't get to record on our little road trip, and we thought it would be appropriate since American Gods is kind of about a road trip across America. And it really does talk about the importance of roadside attractions in the book, which they don't go into a whole lot in Season 1 of American Gods, which I know a lot of people may have just watched the TV show and not actually read the book. So with that being said, there's spoilers.
Yes. I didn't really read the books. I listened to about like half of it, maybe? No, probably not even that much.
Well, yeah, about half. So.
Yeah, because we were on road trips. We like to listen to audiobooks, but on road trips, I also fall asleep. So.
Yeah. So anyway, that was one of our ones, and spoiler alert for the series, and not just Season 1, but for any ones to come, because I read the book and I'm going to compare that because, I do that.
Because that's what I do.
And just because 3 episodes of this warning may not be enough for Kathy.
I wasn't even going to mention it this time.
Okay.
But now that you brought it up, go ahead.
There is a graphic sex warning for this show. Because you do have a goddess who is a goddess of fertility, and so she is very weirdly sex scenes. So
yeah. Well, obviously, if you've seen this show, you know exactly what we're talking about. So we're good. Let's move on.
All right. So a brief review and summary. My brief summary would be that. You have Shadow Moon, who is an ex-convict who is looking forward to going home to see his wife. His wife dies in a bad car accident, so he gets out early to go to her funeral.
A day early, right?
Well, yeah, it's like a few days early. He runs into this man called Mr. Wednesday, and they end up going on a road trip together because... the wife didn't just die, but his best friend died too, which he was going to go work for his best friend. So
well, that's part of the road trip.
Yeah, I got the beginning part there.
Okay. My review. Okay, so there's Shadow, and he's the main guy, and he was in jail, and he gets out of jail, and he learns his wife had died, and so he's on his way to go to her funeral. He meets up with Mr. Wednesday. Mr. Wednesday is like, hey, you should work for me. And he's like, I don't even know who you are. I met you on the plane. You're kind of weird. And then somehow he convinces them to work for him. They go to the funeral. Sad stuff happens. She's dead, but she's not dead. But she's dead. She's undead. and then after that, they go on a mission for Mr. Wednesday.
Okay.
Wednesday and Shadow driving in a road trip together as one.
This isn't.
I've had a lot of caffeine
this
today.
This isn't Ginger and the Hound. This is not
no.
Fictional sitcom that we're going to make up here.
It kind of sounds like it though.
Yeah.
Like an old white man and a young dude go on a road trip together.
Okay. So, I really wanted to like the show because I love the book. I really do love the book. I love Neil Gaiman's work. But I really feel like it didn't translate to the small screen as well as some other books may. I feel like there's so much nuance in Neil Gaiman's work because he does do a lot of storytelling about storytelling, and so I don't feel like it translated well. I think it's a better book than it is a TV show. So that's my review.
All right. I would agree with that, but then also like to add that the visuals are amazing. Like,
yes, they're very great, awesome visuals.
Like every character that we meet or come along has like a certain like color theme and has a certain aesthetic to them, kind of similar to the Defenders, but I would say it goes just a little bit further because it's a little bit more clear cut. And
well, because they're entering those worlds.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
But yeah, awesome visuals. Yeah.
All right.
And then the rest, I agree with you. I did. It did catch me. It did kind of like there are some like low points to where I just couldn't keep my attention. But I guess that happens in almost everything. But that would be a little negative for me.
All right. Well, speaking of storytelling, this is really what I want to go with for this one, is because of this work is the importance of story, and I think that this is really what the play of the entire theme of not just the show but the book is about. The old stories versus the new stories, the overarching kind of narrative journey that all of Americana is on, and I think this is something that it's really the unifying story of what makes a people a people. You know, that we have an identity, and our identity is wrapped up in the stories that we tell. And I think that's very important because all of us have our own narrative. All of us have our own story, and when they come together, they break apart. And I think that's very much ingrained in us. We love stories, and that's why we go to see movies. That's why we watch TV. That's why we do a lot of the things that we do. We read. We listen to podcasts. Wink, wink.
Go to plays.
Yeah, and all these things, it's narrative. It's because it's in us. We enjoy hearing stories or seeing stories, seeing these things play out, and I think it's very essential to the podcast because this is honest faith. This is where we pull things into our own world, where we see either a problem that we need to fix or we see something that we can make our world better with, through these little pieces of the narrative, and I think this is so much part of American Gods, and the unifying story throughout it all is the road trip.
Yeah, and
really, I think that Neil Gaiman is very on point with this because this is Americana.
I was about to say, like that's a very American thing because America is so vast and the car industry really got its boom here in America. That was one of the things that was like a highlight point for families. Once they got a car, they didn't have to just stick around to their little dinky town. They could actually like travel their state, go to the next state. They could go across the country if they wanted to as a family. And it kind of opened up these doors. And a lot of people now have these great memories as like children of going on road trips. So that's why I think it's such ingrained in Americana.
And that's very much a part of the book, which is may come into season 2 a little bit, is about the roadside attraction. Is that these things have a story to tell. And that's what makes them so important. Like the world's largest ball of yarn, or the largest cross in the Western Hemisphere,
or the shoe.
Yeah, the house shaped like a shoe.
Yep. There's also a house that's shaped like a dog as well too.
Yep. There is a hotel that is like all like traffic cones.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's traffic cones now. I think this was after Cars that they remade it into traffic cones, but it was
teepees.
and all these other ones that
The Corn Palace.
the Corn Palace, yes, because we have traveled through there several times and we've never gone to see the Corn Palace.
We have seen the outside of the Corn Palace,
Yeah.
I think. But I have to say, the Corn Palace is kind of cool because they decorate it different every single year. Look it up. Do your own research. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's also like the Dolls, Wisconsin, is it? The Wisconsin Dells? Anyway, they've got like theme parks and they've got like all these things there. But like you would never know it unless you were driving through, if you were driving I-90 across America.
Yep.
And that's the point, is that this is a unifying story. Almost everybody in America has done a road trip at some point in their lives. And I think that, that's something where we resonate with as a society is with the road trip. And I think that's the overarching kind of story that he's trying to say, is that this is Americana. That he's putting into this is that these are all the stories that have melted together, that have made America what it is. North America, United States of America, I should say, because America's it's the Western Hemisphere pretty much. So, and with all of the stories of all the gods in here, is that it is the story of America. It is how our old stories and our new stories have kind of been at it with each other. And I know that we'll be talking about that here in a second, but I want to say that this is very much trying to get at what is your narrative as a person, as a human being, is how does your narrative fit into the larger narrative as a whole. And that's something that Shadow struggles with throughout the entire series. That's what Laura struggles with in the series. That's even though that's kind of the big twist at the end. So here's the big spoiler alert that you're probably not going to get until like season 3, season 4.
Wait, should we say this, Miguel? Because we're reviewing the TV show. We're not reviewing the book.
Okay. But it's part of it is that the narrative is part of your identity. Is that if you were to take somebody's identity away from them, you would take away all of their stories, all of their memories, all of everything that makes them them.
I would also say, too, that part of American Gods is also trying to take control of your narrative as well,
Yes,
too. There's
exactly.
a lot of, especially like with Laura, like she's constantly like chasing after Shadow and like literally chasing after Shadow, Yeah. She's trying to get control back in her life, become alive again, stop dropping random body parts as she is literally decaying. What the funny thing is you have a more interesting narrative when you have conflict.
Yep.
And so that's why her story is so interesting. Now, if she had control over her own narrative, it would just be about a girl.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very exciting and very appealing.
And I think that's, when Shadow meets Laura at the casino, and I think that's kind of showing that as well as part of this whole narrative theme about narrative, is that Shadow leads this somewhat exciting life of being a thief, being this, kind of outcast of society, this bad boy. This is kind of why Laura, invites him home, is because she wants to get excitement in her life, to have that conflict, to make her story a better story. And so, yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think this is the big part of that, is that we give, and this is how all of the gods came to be in the stories, that all of the gods were given life through stories. And that what's interesting about us human beings is that story gives us life. So we give life through story, and we get life through story. And I think this is a beautiful, the book in itself is a beautiful tale of life, of that kind of cycle of giving our stories and getting life from other people's stories and listening to each other and knowing that we're not alone. And I think that's essential. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine recently about this very thing. I found a few weeks ago the hashtag Empty the Pews on Twitter, and just through that and through a Facebook group called Ex-Evangelicals, I've really just started to discover that I'm not the only one that has gone through this kind of extreme evangelical upbringing, and that my struggle is not the only struggle, and that my story is not the only story, which is great. It's wonderful to know that you're not alone, and I think this is the story of these gods, is that their people came to this country, and that's how they got here to this country, was because they were told in story through their people. And that's why in the show they have almost every single different type of Jesus for each and every different people group.
I was actually just going to bring up Easter because, she is an example of she had one story, and that's how she became to be, but then she's morphed into something else. Yeah. Now she is more, Christianized, obviously, since Easter is so tied into the Christian story now. And I just, wanted to bring that up, how, she has also changed because the stories about her have changed.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think that, so oftentimes the old stories get replaced by new stories. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is very much a tale of how that can be both good and bad in ways.
Yeah, especially with her, that's a prime example of, out with the old, in with the new. She even says that, too. She's I'm fine because, I am still, even though I'm an old god, I now have new life and new pizzazz because I'm tied in with this other holiday that really had nothing to do with what she was before. And this is something kind of similar, kind of reminded me of what happened to the Native Americans when, and I'm going to say we, as in me, as white people. Obviously, I was not alive at that point in time, obviously, but when...
Maybe you were. Maybe you've been tricking me all along.
Maybe. But, so if, to most of our listeners here, probably most of you live in the United States and kind of know a little bit about what happened to the Native Americans in the United States, or know a little bit about it. I feel like growing up in Montana, part of Montana legislature is actually to teach all Montana students Native American history. So through moving from state to state, I have realized that not everybody knows exactly what happened. They know that there's reservations, and they know that they were moved into those reservations, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So
not everybody got the Trail of Tears part of history.
Yeah, and part of the Trail of Tears is after that happened. Well, actually, there was missions already set up in areas that were prominent with the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. However, it became more than that. It started out with, hey, there's going to be this mission here. Why don't you go and tell them about Jesus and tell them about our God? Because these guys are heathens and they're uncivilized and very Disney Pocahontas idea of
yeah,
you're savages.
Exactly.
And what really bothers me is these people welcomed us white men for the most part. There was some other scuffles, but they welcomed us into this land. They showed us how to farm the right kind of food, how to survive throughout the winter. And then what did we do after we kind of grew up? We were thanks, but now you're going to have to move.
Yeah. It's our land now.
It's now for us. Thank you for your help. Now please go. And it'd be if a stranger, if you saw a stranger outside and needed help and you're hey, come inside my house. Here, I will feed you. I will show you how to make your own clothes, all this other stuff. And then later on, the stranger's like, okay, this is my house now. And like, just like makes you go on the street, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty similar to that in my mind. But anyway, sorry, I can go on and on about
or
injustice.
Here, you can live in that shed out back. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yep.
That's your land now.
Yep. But we're gonna keep moving that shed out further and further.
Yes.
So then we can keep encroaching and building our house. And part of this movement that people clearly did not see is any beauty in what they had already, what the Native Americans had already established in terms of their culture, in terms of their religion. A lot of them just have these beautiful stories that they tell. And I grew up with some of those stories. Like I grew up learning about the stories about the Pryor Mountains. Like if you're from Montana, maybe you know about those stories. And like, because I grew up with them, like I learned to appreciate it as well too. But I mean, that was just not going to happen, you know, because we were just trying to get them out of our way. And
well, and I mean, some of the older tribes who are mostly gone now, like my own, like the Aztec, you know, our gods aren't, you know, we get kind of mixed up with the Mayans sometimes, but I mean, that's one of the symbols that I made that I'm really wanting to get as a tattoo is an English cross, which represents my mom's family. They all come from England or Ireland, and they were early American settlers. You know, they were here, and they farmed the land in Oklahoma. They moved to California during the gold rush, and you know, it's long history, which is beautiful, a beautiful history, but you know, there is some dark parts of that. And then, you know, you have my dad's side, which is the Mexican side, which has both the Spanish, you know, conquerors that came in and pushed that people out and killed them off, and my grandmother on my dad's side, who is Aztec, and you know, she the gods of the Aztecs were these beautiful stories like Quetzalcoatl, which is part of that symbol, which for me, because Quetzalcoatl is a god who loved humanity, that loved humans and spilled its own blood for human beings. So I mean, those two stories in themselves are very congruous. Is that they speak of a love for us weird beings that call ourselves human, and that through the spilling of God blood that we have become more than just human, and so that's why I wanted to combine those two for the symbol for me.
Yeah, because it represents you.
Exactly, but you know, sorry.
No, that's okay. Part of what happened to, of course, the Aztecs, well, besides murder, was after they were done with the murdering, they tried to civilize them. So I don't know if many people like know this part as well. So like after the Native Americans were pushed into these reservations, they each had set up, the government has set up schools, churches, and as part of that, I mean, it was very westernized schools. Like, they were taught just, you know, basic Western, like, math, like, reading, that kind of stuff. And they weren't allowed to speak in anything other than English. A lot of the tribes, like, they were going to lose, like, their native language. Luckily, there's been this big revival to try to bring that back again, because it is so much a part of their culture.
Well, and, I mean, even the Navajo, oh, man, what do they call themselves? Do they call themselves the Hopi?
Are you going to bring up during, was it World War II?
World War II, the code talkers.
Yeah.
The wind talkers. That's what I think they were called. And using their language to code things, which, none of the other countries could figure out because Navajo wasn't widely known.
No, because all the Western countries know are like the majority of the Romance languages and languages based off of that.
Yeah.
So they come this other language, they have no idea. So, and it wasn't anything similar to what they had known before. So, but anyway, back to that language. Like I said before, there's been a big push to try to revitalize that. And there's been a big push to bring back powwows and bring back the sense of community in the tribes and tribal pride. And I have been lucky enough to actually go to powwows and like witness it myself. And it's like an awesome feeling. And I don't know, it's...
I've been to some. I had a teacher in my elementary school who often did them and, put them on for the school and to kind of teach about his culture. And he had a whole, kind of his own native garb and everything else. And it was, he did a hoop dance with hula hoops and stuff. And it was, I think one of my favorite things to watch was this hoop dance that he would do.
Oh yeah,
us.
yeah. They did that too in our schools too. They'd bring dancers and they would let us like see the actual dress that they had. And oh my gosh, like the beading work, like they do it all by hand.
Yeah.
It's stunning. It's amazing. I would not have the patience to do that personally. But anyway, if you're anywhere near an area that is offering a powwow free to the public, please go. Please experience it. You're not going to regret it. Anyway, sorry. Enough talking about, like, boasting about that. So, in America, that was obviously a bad example of trying to get rid of the old and replace it with the new.
Yes.
Because it did a lot of damage.
Yeah.
A lot of damage that we're still trying to recover from. I would say that a small example of not necessarily taking out the old and replacing it with the new, but incorporating the old with the new is with the Romans. Mm-hmm. So the Romans, as you know, was they're conquerors. That was primarily what they did. And I would say that they did it differently, but I don't know if they did it any better. I guess they did do a little bit better, but not like stellar. Like nowadays, I would prefer them like if you're going to conquer somebody, but don't conquer anybody. But if you are going to conquer somebody, just like let the people that you conquer do their thing still. But what the Romans did instead is they tried to incorporate the culture of the area and then also the religion in terms of like the Greeks, obviously, and they tried to incorporate it into their own way of life, and they did that. It was very strategic because that way the Greeks weren't as mad about being conquered by the Romans. There was another group as well, too, that heavily influenced Rome. And they, too, this was as a result of the Romans conquering them and then taking their good ideas and incorporating it into Roman life. And that was I cannot say it correctly.
The Etruscans. Etruscan? Yeah, that word.
We'll spell it for you all. Etrucsons. And with them, they actually had gladiators before Romans did, and so Romans like, oh, gladiators, people killing other people for the spectator sport. Hooray, let's incorporate this. Obviously, I do not feel that way about gladiators. But then they also brought in elements of politics as well, too. Like, we see Rome and Romans as being, like, the idea of a democracy, but... They learned it from other people. Yeah. Like we credit them for all these things, but in reality, they learned it from somebody else. And of course, these are just like two groups that they did this with. There are other groups to where they did just squash them. I know that when they were trying to go more like north,
yeah, the Germanic tribes.
When they tried to do that, it didn't work out as well because they were so far away that it just. I mean, at that point in time, the Roman Empire got too big for what they could handle, so it didn't work out as well.
Yeah, and it was also very much like in Game of Thrones where, fighting in the north where it's cold and they are not used to cold and winter, that, that's not going to end well because the Germanic tribes are like, yeah, we're used to this. Cold, the cold doesn't bother me anyway. Let it go.
As they like let their hair down and they burst into song. But I think that what we can at least learn from the Romans is to gather up knowledge of the area around you, of the people around you, of the culture around you that you aren't necessarily aware of, and instead of just trying to push it out and dismiss it and put your own beliefs on them, why don't you take a look and see what you like about it? Yeah,
and what's the funny thing about this is that it's all about the Americana. But what the funny thing is that you have so many Americans who live in these great cities and great towns that they never go and explore them. They never go and see what is there and what is native to them and local to them. Like here in Cleveland, we have just tons of stuff to do, and I can say where we are in the city. We can. I mean that I can say that we're here in the city because it's large enough that you're probably not going to find us. But that Cleveland's got all these great things like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's got
the art museum,
the free art museum, except for the special exhibits.
Yeah.
It has, Museum of Modern Art. It's got
botanical
all these
gardens.
museums and gardens and Lake Erie and NASA Science Center. And if you really, really want to watch football but don't care about a team, you can go watch the Browns. Oh, man, I'm going to be crucified for saying that.
Yeah. But if you like to watch a team that wins, you could always watch baseball.
Yes, the tribe is here, which, I'm part of the group that feels like they need to change their name, but
yeah, me too. And
or at least their mascot.
But anyway, they're trying to. They're trying. At least, well, some people are trying.
Yeah.
But you really don't just dismiss something just because essentially you don't want to explore and expand your knowledge on it. You never know what you can actually pick and choose from it.
Yeah.
And incorporate into your own life.
And by the way, I know that a lot of people associate things like birds with different ideas, and this is from different stories of people, is that they are from your ancestors' native lands. And one of the things that I was really interested in reading about was about Native American prayers and about the way that a lot of their religious outlooks are. And as I was reading through this book, one of the things was if you're looking for symbols in the land that you're in, you really need to go and speak to those people who have been in that land for a lot longer than you have. So seeking out their, a native tribe that is nearby and going and talking to them and being like, okay, let's talk. I want to learn about your symbols and, what does this bird mean? Because I've been seeing this bird a lot. And, a lot of them will give you their stories. And because it's part of who we are as human beings is sharing our stories.
All you got to do is just be willing to sit and listen.
Exactly.
Just sit and listen.
So where do we go from here? This is
Sit
something.
and listen.
Yes, sit and listen. One of the things that I noticed about the show, I think especially, was that this is very much very common of the new America, is that we've got this old Jesus, this Jesus who was the original Jesus, the one from the actual Israel and was crucified on Golgotha outside of Jerusalem. And you have this new American Jesus who is...
In like white robes and a blue sash.
Yeah, white robes and blue sash and conditioned hair and carrying a lamb around.
Just can you imagine just like some guy just like walking around with a lamb
and long conditioned hair and a perfectly trimmed beard.
Yeah.
And, he's ripped because for some reason he's ripped. And
he has light skin.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it is that, some of the things that he's saying, I mean, if you were to have that Jesus saying these things, he sounds like a stoner. Mm-hmm. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends. Hey, you gonna pass that?
Mm-hmm. We get a little help from our friends sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. and I think this is so much the story of America, is that we've got these differing ideas, especially within the church, and this is I'm talking to this now after Nashville statement, after things that happened in Houston with the hurricane and with all of this other stuff, is that we've got this old Jesus, this Jesus who taught us to love and to give of ourselves unconditionally because God loves us unconditionally, with this new Jesus who is all about, making sure that you're okay first and not, and I'm not going to worry about those people who are hurting over there because I'm more important than them.
And it's not my job.
Yeah, and this new Jesus is more in line with 1950s Americana than the Jesus of old.
Yep, take care of yourself.
And so there's those two gods are at war with each other, I feel like, is that you've got this new Jesus and you've got an old Jesus. And I prefer to follow the old Jesus because I like that guy. Mm-hmm. He may not be the beauty pageant model, but he's one with the people. He loves the people, and there were a lot of things that were added to the story, later on and over the course of things. But that's a different story for a different day. But I like the old Jesus, and I think this is essential to adding that to your own narrative is learning about the old Jesus, learning
about what old stuff
Jesus actually was, learning about the old stories and why these stories were in place. It's because as an astrologist put it, he was on Bill Nye's Science Show on Netflix, and he was saying, okay, look, I know that you think that I'm just a crock because astrology is not a science. Mm-hmm. And he goes, yeah, I know that's not a science. It's an interpretive art. It's how we make sense of the universe, is that we see that happening and it's making sense of the universe. That's all we do as human beings, is try to make sense of the universe in our own little ways. And science just tells us, oh yeah, this is how it's happening, but we're trying to figure out what it means.
Well, an eclipse, for an example.
Oh yeah, an eclipse. Like, we know how it happens. The moon comes in between the sun and the earth, and for some reason the moon is the perfect distance away to completely cover over the sun with just that coronal projection around it. And so, we have all of these myths, and we have all these stories of why that happens, why it matters in our universe. And
like a lot of it has to do with predicting like doom and gloom a lot of the times.
Sometimes, not all the time.
No, yeah.
And so I think that's why it's important to learn the stories of the land that you're in, and also the stories of old. I think that's very much what American Gods is all about, is to learn the stories. And you'll come to find out more about the Native American gods later, and I'm sure other seasons because you do later on in the book.
Well, and there's a lot of wisdom that can be gleaned out of these stories that you may not get from the normal Christian narrative.
Exactly. And narrative is important, like I said, is that it's how we learn how to be better human beings. It's how we learn how to be better towards each other. And
that's why do you think we read like storybooks to children about sharing and about, being nice to your friends,
Yeah, exactly. Well, we need to wrap up now because we're running out of time.
Oops.
But in closing, we've got our upcoming schedule of what's coming up. So in the next week we are doing The Defenders, season 1. We are going to be doing Game of Thrones after that, season 7?
Yes.
Yes, season 7. And then after that, we're doing Mr. Robot season 1. And then the week after, we'll do Mr. Robot season 2. For feedback on any of those, if you've got anything to say about things that you pulled from any of those things, like Game of Thrones, come on. Everybody watched Game of Thrones season 7.
Yes. Can we just say the wall?
If you pulled anything from that, give us a call at our Google Voice number, which is 720-372-3879.
Oh, and apparently a lot of people don't know this. That's just a normal phone number.
Yeah.
So even though it's tied in with like a Google Voice box, you can actually just dial it. There's no extra cost to it at all for you. Just call, leave a message.
Exactly. Or you can find us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on everything, even though we don't really post all that much on things like Instagram. But give us feedback there or email us, honestfaithconvos@gmail.com. Find the website, thehonestfaith.com. Buy my book. And
nice plug, honey.
well, we are doing a contest for my birthday, which was on Friday, on September 1st. So we're doing it through the month of September. If you like and share our page or our Twitter handle on Facebook or Twitter, and enter in to win one of my signed books. So we're going to do that during the month of September. So make sure you like and share and subscribe and all the fun things. And you can win a book.
A signed book.
Yes, and even if you don't care about my book, you can still take it and throw it at people you don't like or use it to start a fire.
Yeah, if you have a wobbly table and you need a little lift on one of the corners, it's great size for that.
And with all that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.